This is Black Market Leadership, the underground resource for disruptors and status quo breakers.
Welcome, everyone, to Black Market Leadership. This is Kevin Black. We have I am extraordinarily excited. Someone who I have been following for years, who I find just inspirational and who's just really cool. My guest is the Carol Roth. Hello, Carol.
Hi, Kevin. That's a very nice introduction. I hope I can live up to the coolness on the podcast.
Oh, Carol, I have no doubt. So for the audience, I have a little bit of your bio here. Carol,
okay.
Carol Roth is an American TV personality, New York Times bestselling author, entrepreneur, radio host, and investor. She regularly appears on national cable television networks such as Fox Business, CNBC, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. She was also one of the judges on Mark Burnett's America's Greatest Makers television show and a weekly panelist on current events on the Bulls and Bears show on Fox Business. She was the host of WGN's radio's The Noon Show and author. And guys, you got to get this. Go to Amazon, The Entrepreneur Equation. After, of course, you get The War on Small Business. You got to pick that up as well. And she's a host of her own podcast, The Roth Effect, which I highly recommend. You've had some really, really cool guests, Carol. And finally, because you have such a great bio, I got to say this. She is a self-styled recovering investment banker, in which she completed more than $2 billion in capital raising, mergers and acquisitions. And most of all, she has her own action figure.
You can see right behind me if you're watching the video version of that.
There we go. Yeah, pretty cool, Carol. Well, thank you so much for being on Black Market Leadership.
My pleasure. All right, what you got for me, Kevin?
Okay, so one of the things that I love talking about, and one of the things that we focus on are disruptors. And boy, talk about disruption. I have your book here, and for the audience, The War on Small Business. And I tell you right now, people, you got to pick it up. So I want to read on the back here. You have praise for the War on Small Business, and I want to read Neil Cavuto's because I think.
Yeah, it's a pretty good one.
Yeah, it is pretty good. Okay, so quote, "It's no secret that the pandemic has left a lasting and devastating impact on small businesses across America. Leave it to Carol Roth to say lots of those businesses didn't die. They were murdered by a deliberate and targeted war on their independence and very livelihoods. She lays bare the concerted carving up of our capitalist ideals and free market, meticulously planned and ruthlessly delivered. Be warned, this book is not for the faint of heart, but it is a must read for those who still have a heart." What a testimonial.
Yeah, Neil's got away with words. You've read the book. Do you feel like that was an accurate testimonial?
Yeah. So first thoughts. I read it, and first of all, kudos to you, because at the end you mentioned this was a Herculean effort. The editing on this is amazing. It really is. And I think, was it 270 pages? It is an easy read. It is not overcomplicated. It's to the point. And I want to tell you, reading this, I got mad because I think myself and a lot of people out there recognize that, politicians are kind of slimy. Shake their hands. You got to wash your hands afterward. Reading this, I never realized just how bad it was. And if you were a prosecutor, you have a strong case, a strong evidentiary case of what the U.S. government, as you say, the central planners, what they've done to small businesses. So my question to you is, what inspired you to pick this fight?
Well, since you've been following me for a while, you might know that I've been a longtime advocate for small business, a group that does not get nearly enough advocacy. And as you mentioned, I wrote a book previously about 10 years ago about all of the difficulties of running your own business and all of the risks. And never did I think that the number one risk to a small business in the United States of America was going to be the US government coming in, shutting them down, not compensating them for doing so appropriately, and letting their big competitors at the same time stay open. Like, that was like, what? Like, how's that going to happen? So, that was, that's always been sort of my philosophy, is I'm going to stand up for the little guy. But when HarperCollins approached me to do an economic deep dive on this historic scenario, and I just wrote kind of as I saw things happening, and obviously stuff got uncovered, months after it happened, and it to keep kind of going back and keeping track of this crazy timeline, this crazy set of actions and outcomes. It was clear that this government picking of winners and losers, not based on data or science, but based on political clout and connection, was a huge story, as was what it enabled, which was a historic transfer of wealth from Main Street to Wall Street. And so I knew that that was going to be a big story. And frankly, I thought I was going to have to compete with a whole ton of other people to be the first to tell this story. And unfortunately, not only am I the first person, but there's a whole bunch of media who doesn't want to cover this story. So that's been a giant surprise for me, for my publisher, that, we thought we were getting beat to the market, and it's been sort of the opposite. They're trying to sweep the story under the rug. So I'm thrilled historically to have this living document that will not let people be gaslit, that will tell you exactly in no uncertain terms what happened, because the story is going to be, well, the economy's fine, the economy's recovered, it's great. And sure, if you're the 7 tech companies that gained $3.4 trillion in value on a headline basis, that looks great. The stock market increased, that looks great. When you get into the underpinnings and how much of that went from this decentralized portion of the economy to the central portion of the economy, how it took away economic freedom and wealth creation opportunities for millions of Americans, you start to understand what's going on, and it's actually really frightening.
What's the response been?
So it's been, if I can get you to read the book, the response has been overwhelmingly positive across the political spectrum, by the way. This is a political economic book, but it's not a partisan book. It's not about politics per se. It's just that's the underpinning of a lot of what happened. So I have people who are very far on one side and very far on the other, who all say, wow, this is great. It was so well researched. You really didn't call names. You didn't really pick favorites here. Nobody escaped unscathed. And, I learned so much. So if I can get you to read the book, the feedback's been amazing. The problem, the roadblock that I've encountered, as I sort of alluded to, is that a lot of the mainstream media does not want to cover this, which is insane because it's important and they want to rewrite what happened in history. So I've, at this point in time, done exactly 0 primetime shows and 0 morning shows, which, to a listener may not sound like a big deal, but you have to understand I've been in the media for 12 years and I'm on TV like 2 to 5 times a week and have been for like 12 years. And I've been on these shows and I know these people, and people who, I've gone on to talk about nonsense on their shows before aren't supporting this book. Now, there are a lot of people in the decentralized media who have been great supporters and have given us a platform. And so that's the route that I've taken, much like a small business, right? You go to these kind of smaller outlets and you do it more frequently and you try to spread the word that way. But in terms of getting a lot of the big megaphones, there have only been a couple of those opportunities afforded. And when those are afforded, they do very well. I just had a piece in the New York Post, basically saying COVID didn't kill small businesses, the government did. And that got huge traction. I mean, my second retweet of it got 3,000 likes on Twitter and all kinds of people commenting. And that wasn't even the first one. That was the follow-up one. So we know there's an interest from people, from the average Americans who want to hear about this and who want to learn, but the people who control the platforms don't want you to know about it, which unintentionally proves the thesis that I'm trying to set forth anyway. So
that's such a great point. I was really wondering, so when I was reading this and I picked it up, knowing your background, I was like, man, there's going to be a lot of economics in this. I mean, obviously COVID, the CARES Act. And I read this and originally when I picked the book up, I'm like, okay, this is going to be for entrepreneurs and small business owners. But the more I read it, I was thinking, this is for Americans.
Yeah.
Because you've done something with this, and I'm going to give you praise here by making this correlation. But, we just got through the 4th of July. And one of the things that my family does is we watch the episode of John Adams, HBO John Adams, where they read the Declaration of Independence. And, everyone knows that, the preamble about all men created equal. Well, a lot of people who have not read the Declaration don't realize like 5/6 of that document are the evidentiary points of how the king screwed us over. So reading your book, you've done something which I think is fascinating. It's not just a case based on evidence, but you do something that so many people do not do. You tie capitalism, not just to economics, but to personal liberty. The attacks on small businesses are attacks on our liberty. So I found that fascinating. And my question to you is, most people who I've talked to about capitalism don't make that connection. Where did you learn to make these connections? Was this through your reading, your experiences? How did you do this?
I mean, Lord, that's a great question. I've been studying markets, and so kind of de facto studying capitalism like my entire life. I've been fascinated by the concept of markets and freedom and entrepreneurship and those kinds of things. But I was never political. I got dragged into this kind of political sphere unintentionally. And I was telling her, like, I just wanted to be a game show host. Like, all of this just, came out. I still want to be a game show host. This is all just like, so I don't know how we ended up over here, but that's what happened. But I just feel like as I continued my studies, and even though I'm like an economics major from Wharton and a former investment banker, a recovering investment banker, I don't learn sort of the same way that other people do. And when they start talking about like, are you supply side or are you Keynesian? Like, I don't know. Like, those are all like very theoretical. I like to take things that are real and try to explain it. And I feel like that's always been a gift of being able to break things down and kind of explain them in these sort of Sesame Street kind of bites. So I feel like, just as I've uncovered and been in the media talking about things and learned more about the structure of our country, how it was built, what capitalism is, and just kind of, it's just been an ongoing formulation that I've kind of put it together in that way. And that's why I try to explain to people, because I feel like people get caught up in the semantics, like what's capitalism, what's social, and whatever. And that's why I tried to, when I created that spectrum that I put in the book, in the back half of the book, that I just try to explain, like, capitalism is just like freedom, choice, transparency, with the guardrails of the protection of individual rights, including property rights. Like that's all it is. It's just us having free choice versus central planning, which is a handful of people making decisions and using force and coercion and control. I feel like that's just a better way, because it doesn't matter what the label is and it doesn't matter the flavor of it, but it's like, do you want us to individually make these choices and have the freedom and reap the rewards and consequences, or do you like trust like a handful of goofballs to make these decisions and really think that that's going to somehow benefit you and everybody else? And so I feel like breaking it down and kind of stripping away all of the like weird, wonky academic stuff, conceptually, hopefully gives people a different framework, because that's just how I think about it.
I tell you, this is why I'm a big fan of yours, because I think you are the ideal person to write and present this book, because you said it. You have you're a recovering investment banker. You've seen the other side, but when you talk, you're down to earth. You're not, you don't speak in wonkish terms, and you're not the head of one of these 501c3s like the Cato or the Iron Rain Institute, which do all great work. You're someone who's walked in the shoes. You felt it. And in fact, when you read the dedication to your father, you could feel like this is something really near and dear to you. And you feel for small business. This is not just data on a chart for people to see.
No, it's true. I mean, my blessing and my curse is that I am an empath and a problem solver and a helper, like all in one, which is like a bad combination. So I feel very deeply, and it really weighs on my shoulders. And I think coming from a blue collar family, and having my dad grew up in like very much poverty on the west side of Chicago, and changed his lot in life through great choices and hard work, and created an opportunity to the point where like I am successful beyond even my wildest dreams. And it's like I don't feel like it's because I'm special in any way, or like like the chosen one. It's just that's the opportunity that is there if you want to take it, and if people tell you that you can take it. And that's what my dad did. He was always like go get it, go get it. There's there's no limit. It was an abundance mentality, and there's so many people who were like, no, only one person can be successful, and there's only this pie. And so I just take it very personally, and I don't like seeing other people like I said, I'm not a power and control person. I just I'm really excited about all the things that I've seen. I want to preserve that opportunity for other people. I think it's really cool. And unfortunately, we're the only example of that in the world, and it's under threats. And so if it's not us and we don't preserve that opportunity, where's that opportunity going to exist? And I don't think it's to the betterment of anybody. So so that sort of personal aspect of let's get everybody, in everyone can succeed. It doesn't take away from anyone to have more people participating. It's a good thing, is just sort of my philosophy. And it sounds like that fortunately showed through in the writing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I have some questions here about some topics. I plucked out a couple of topics just to give the reader, these future readers of the war on small business, a couple topics to bring up to you. But before I do that, though, I have a question.
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
I think I found an Easter egg in this book.
It may have been completely unintentional.
I think I found one. So for the audience, now Easter egg, that's a young people talk. There's some kind of secret little inference of an inside joke. So for the audience, for you, Carol, I'm going to do a movie impression. There's a chapter here named after one of your favorite movies. Okay, so the impression is for the audience. You got to guess it. You want me to bring something else? No. Trading Places, chapter 12.
Exactly.
Was that intentionally to name after your favorite Eddie Murphy movie?
I mean, there's definitely a slight nod, and really the whole story of the little guy versus the big guy is the story of Trading Places. So I've written sort of about that Winthrop and Valentine versus the Duke dynamic before. So yeah, it's a little bit of a nod there. So
all right.
You did well in ascertaining that.
Oh, well, thank you. Okay, all right. So one of the big things, I've listened to one of your other interviews. Could you tell the audience what's so big about this book, The Black Swan? What is The Black Swan?
So The Black Swan, which is a book by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who is this very smart former derivatives trader and philosopher, is a book that he wrote that's very wonky. It's very hard to read, but the premise is that we're in this interconnected world, and there are these things that happen that nobody can predict. And it's been sort of co-opted in language to say, it's just kind of an unforeseen event that comes out of nowhere. And so when we talk about what happened in 2020, there are all these people like, the pandemic, the black swan of the pandemic. And it's like, no, the pandemic wasn't a black swan at all. I mean, people not only had been talking about this forever, but there was a drill that was done in 2019 called Crimson Contagion that was with the federal government, a number of the agencies, like 12 to 14 states, a bunch of local jurisdictions. And by the way, it's like, if you look into it, it's frightening. It's like the exact scenario. It's like, oh, this like bio agent escapes from like a lab in China and comes here. I mean, it's like literally the same. So they literally practiced for this months before this happened. So there's no black swan there. They weren't prepared, but they practiced, they knew. The black swan was the government reaction. Like, we've never seen a point where they're like, okay, there is, you know, an illness that's out here, and we've had obviously, you know, MERS and H1N1 and all kinds of things where they're like, we're just going to like shut down a large swath of the economy. That, like, nobody predicted that. And I remember like early on going on these TV programs, and I was concerned that we were going to have a black swan. I said that on Cheddar. I mentioned that in the book. This was not and like, again, since they were unknown, I didn't know what it was. But this was not like within the realm that like, oh, if it comes here, it like so much so that when my husband and I were having this discussion in February, like, we're like, okay, like, so like, if let's say this did come here, like, what could you do? Like, what, like, we just, you know, kind of hypothetically, what would you do? And I said, well, like, imagine trying to lock down to get like everyone locked down for 2 weeks. I was like, there's no way you could do it. And he agreed, there's no way you could do it. And in a sense, we were right, because they didn't lock down the economy. They just locked down part of the economy. And that, you know, kind of ended up in this whole picking of winners and losers dynamic that we lay out. But that was the black swan. And by the way, the narrative is not that. The narrative is that there was a full lockdown, that we were all in it together, and, you know, so on and so forth, and that this was like some sort of rational decision. And so that's part of what I try to lay the case out in the book, that that's not what happened, so that you can be armed with the knowledge, because they are gaslighting and they are trying to rewrite history. And if people aren't wise to what the reality of it is, it will happen again, and it will be worse the next time, because we just proved how easy it was to control the population of the United States of America.
Yeah, I really, really enjoy that point, because it wasn't the natural phenomena; it was the human not the human interaction. It was the man-made catastrophe, which we made out of it. And if I remember right, the definition was something to the effect of, you know, altering customs and patterns. So yeah, I was shocked. And as you wrote about the government's reaction and I guess the mandates to close down for some of the population, and you started talking about the emergency use authorization, just how burdensome, I couldn't believe we're in a catastrophe. Speed is of the essence, and they slowed everything down. And the one thing I just want to tell you, I've always studied military strategy, military history. And one thing I've learned over the years is wars are won 20 to 30 years prior to them actually being started. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, holy shit, this is our government. Look at this. Look how they screwed this up. And when you talk about the levels, not to screw up, but here's the thing. It's not like you said, it wasn't an accident. I think Ayn Rand said best, like, you know, errors in this kind of judgment errors of this magnitude are not by accident. And you point out that it wasn't just by accident, that it just so happened that there were certain beneficiaries. Oh my God. Go figure.
Right. It just so happened, if you were connected and had clout, that it was to your benefit, or they found a way to take care of you. And it's interesting that you use that 20 to 30 year time frame, because that's pretty much the time frame that I cover in the book, kind of the last 20-ish, maybe 30 years, to lay out what has happened and how that enabled this war. So like, when you're in the military analogy is right there. So like, you can take that and apply it directly to the thesis in the book.
Oh my gosh. It's it's heartbreaking. I mean, it's not just heartbreaking. I was just infuriated reading it. And if I remember right, I mean, God, you had so many great statistics in here.
Hundreds.
Well, yeah. In fact, over 500 sources.
Which I had to check like 5 times and have like 3 proofreaders check. Yeah.
One of the stats I read was, if I'm right, for the CARES Act, only 20% went to small businesses, which represent half the economy. Only 20%.
Yeah, I mean, it actually may be less. I have to go back and do the actual calculation, but yeah, just underneath that, which is, and again, this is where the frustration comes, because there was a path. And I don't need to I'm a liberties person, but like if you were a lockdown person, as I've said, there were no lockdowns, so we can't argue that was a thing. So this middle of the road path, the partial lockdown, the picking of winners and losers, like you can make a justification if you compensate those folks under eminent domain. We're taking your property for the public good. We'll compensate you. You could make that argument, and I lay out the case in the book. They could have spent $1 trillion to like $1.5 trillion, which would have been a fraction of the more than $6 trillion that they spent. And it would have preserved employment. It would have preserved small business. It would have bought them at least 2 to 3 months to figure out mitigation strategies. And it really would have shifted the entire dynamic of what happened last year, and then also what we're dealing with in the supply chain today and in the labor market today, that is the outgrowth of the consequences of these actions. And so they chose not to do that. They treated it like they treat everything else, and it was cash for cronies, trademark, and folks that have other access to capital, who didn't need capital, that were not vulnerable, got all kinds of money, and it was just a mess. And so that's the part that I take issue with, that like, if you're going to say, okay, we need to do something, okay, well, here's a way that you could have done that to achieve the objective, but that wasn't done, and we weren't all locked down, so we weren't all feeling the pain and having, like, if you would have had the stock market not propped up, Amazon's warehouse closed, Walmart, Target, like 2 to 3 weeks, everyone would have been screaming. We would have been out of lockdowns. End of story. So we didn't have it all together. We didn't have the compensation. We didn't have full liberty. We didn't. We just had government whim picking winners and losers, which is the worst of all worlds, for our economic freedom, for individual rights, like for the future of wealth creation opportunities in this country. And that's the through line, is that even if it didn't affect you this time, if you got the golden ticket this time, that doesn't mean you're going to get the golden ticket the next time.
I mean, what maniac out there wants AOC investing with their money? Seriously, maniacs, crazies. It's because we're like when the government picks winners and losers, we pay for it. They pay nothing. So,
right. People forget, like, they don't have any money. They don't create anything of value. So it's either money that they have directly taken from you, or that they have printed out of thin air to devalue what you do already have, and or create a liability for you in the future. So it's really all, in some way, shape, or form, it's all yours.
If you like this content and want to hear other things like it, head on over to the website at blackmarketleadership.com. That's blackmarketleadership.com. There you can subscribe to the podcast, and you can even create a free members profile